I wanted to come on and offer some information about opening the psychic senses, learning everything I've learned in the last few years, not just in psychic development, but in depth psychology and in Kriya Yoga and my Reiki attunements. I've learned a lot of different things that are really important, that contribute to the unfolding of our connection to our soul self, which is what I believe is opening the psychic senses. So it's really a spiritual venture. It's not just some venture where you do some visualizations and you open your third eye and then you can see clairvoyantly. A lot of the psychic development classes that I took and workshops that I take on mediumship, they're really working at honing the ability to communicate with your own soul, or in the case of mediumship, with another soul. And the intention is really so that you can give readings, and my intention in this group is not necessarily to help people to be good at giving readings, because that's not really my intention in life either. It's to help people to have access to their wise self, their higher self, as some people call it, to have access to their intuition. That in our culture it's been stigmatized, it's been, pathologized, and it's been a really scary thing for people to feel empowered to listen to that little voice inside their head, the wise elf. In some context they call it the wise self. So something that was really important for me is to kind of distill everything I've learned down into like 5 steps, which was really hard. I think it's more than 5 steps that I've ultimately come down to. But I wanted to talk about one step at a time, because it's such a vast topic, it's such a big topic, and it's really incremental. Like, I feel like it's a state of progress. Like, you do one thing and then that opens up a little bit of space, and then you do another thing and then it opens up more space. That it's not something that you can just do in one sitting, that it's really a progression of a series of steps is what I see it as. So I wanted to do a video series. So I'm going to talk about what I think is the first step in opening the psychic senses. But before I do that, I want to give a little bit of background as to who I am, why am I talking about this, what information am I bringing, what is my historical, relationship to this topic. So my backstory is that, as a child, I had continuous experiences with, at the time I didn't have language for it. The language I had for it was ghosts, is what I thought it was, ghosts. In every single house that my mom lived in and my father, which they divorced when I was a year old, so they both had different households, and they both ultimately remarried or were in long-term relationships with other people. And my dad's girlfriend had other kids, so it was like 2 completely different households in 2 different states. But it didn't matter where I was in both of those homes, whether it was my mother's or my father's, I had paranormal experiences at night mostly. I saw shadow figures, which would just stand and watch, which was just the creepiest thing. I would hear spirits calling my name. I would feel them in the room, like I would just feel their presence. And I would sometimes get images and stuff, but I didn't know what was happening. When I went to my family to talk to them about it, they would tell me it's just my imagination, that there's nothing to be afraid of, that it's not real. And so that's what I told myself for a very long time. And then when I got a little older, I had a major head trauma when I was 12. And after that head trauma, I started to have some really interesting experiences. I started to have premonitions. So premonitions are basically usually visuals, or knowings. Experiences where I suddenly began to know what was going to happen or see what was going to happen, and then it would happen. And it wasn't always clear. I could talk about the different psychic senses. So I was very clairvoyant. So I would literally see a scenario happen, almost like a movie in my mind. And the closest thing I can say is it's like a memory, but it's not a memory I've ever had. So like an example is I was with 2 friends. I went to this party in the woods, and I went to the car away from the campfire to go get my purse and come back to the party. And when I was walking back, I had a whole visual image that was kind of above the scene. Like, here's the people having a party, here's the parking lot, here's the dark area over here, here's the hill. I saw all of that, and I saw police officers walking in with flashlights and then arresting people and taking them away. And when you have an intuition like that, which that's claircognizance, like I knew it was going to happen, but I clairvoyantly saw it happening, that I knew it was going to happen. And at this point, I had premonitions and didn't know what to do with it and didn't trust or believe it, and then it would happen. And then I'd be like, whoa, that was weird. How did I know that was going to happen? I had that happen a number of times before this experience. So I knew it was going to happen. I trusted it, and I knew that I had a choice to say something to other people and save them from getting arrested. But then I had this fear, like, okay, if I say something and then it doesn't happen, they're going to think I'm crazy. In this situation, I decided I don't care if they think I'm crazy. I know this is going to happen. So I went up and I said, the cops are coming. And someone said, did you see the cops? And I kind of froze because it's like, yeah, I saw the cops, but I didn't see the cops. I saw them in my mind, in my intuition, in my soul space, but I didn't see them. Like, it's not happening right now. And someone just said, cops! And then like everyone sprawled away into the woods away from the campfire. And then like 10 minutes happened and the cops never came. And so people were like, she's crazy, whatever. So they went back down to the fire pit. And I stayed with my friends and they were getting antsy. Like, let's just go back down. Who cares if the cops come? And I was like, no, I don't want to get in trouble with the cops. I really want to stay up here and be safe. Let's just wait a little bit longer. I feel like it's going to happen soon. Sure enough, only a couple minutes later, we saw the cops, and it was interesting because it was kind of in this valley. So we ran up into the woods, and you could see where the cars are, and you can see the campfire on this hill and everything. And I realized that in my premonition, I was seeing this happen from the place I am sitting now in the forest. So from that perspective, I was watching it. So in a sense, it was a memory. It was just a memory that hadn't happened yet, if that makes sense. And I had described the vision to my friends, and the exact same series of events happened. The cops with flashlights walked up. These people over here didn't notice them. They came up, surprised them. Some people tried to run away. The cops chased them. They wrangled everyone together, and then they arrested people, and they took them back out to the parking lot. So that whole thing happened exactly as I saw it happen. And because of the premonition, I was able to avoid getting in trouble. And it was like, okay, at this time I had been really, in my early childhood, I'd been really terrified of the spiritual experiences I was having with spirit. But then as a teenager, after this head trauma, I started to have premonitions, which helped me to trust and doubt my intuition less because it was validated. With premonitions, it's easy because it's like, okay, and I know something's going to happen. And then it happens, so it's validated. So that trust starts to build, and that is such an integral part of intuitive development and opening your psychic senses, is trust and really surrendering to the fact that there's some aspect of you that knows far more through time and space than your human ego self does. So I gained a lot of trust throughout my teenage years with the premonitions. I didn't have as many spirit contacts. And then in my 20s, I was so busy working, I just pretty much shut it down. I still had like my empathic ability where I could sense when people are trustworthy or not and things like that. But it was really after the birth of my son that my psychic senses opened up exponentially, and I was so overwhelmed by it. And I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to because, at this point in my life, I had never met another person that had the same experiences I had as a child, or had premonitions, or just knew things were going to happen like I knew. I'd never met a single other person. So I still had some criticisms in my mind about, is this real? Am I crazy? What's wrong with me? Why am I different than everybody else? I had a lot of negative stigma towards myself and shame towards myself in regards to these psychic senses. So after my son, I went into he was just such an easy baby. He was so happy, and I was the happiest I'd ever been, but I was also in the lowest state I'd ever been. I was really in a depressive mode, and all this stuff came up. I really feel like having a child regressed me back to my infancy and my relationship with my mother, and there was a lot of trauma around that. So I was living all of that. I didn't realize it at the time. As my son grows, I am revisiting all of the things that happened to me when I was his age. And so that's why becoming a parent is so healing, but it's also very challenging if you don't know what's happening. So I was also having a lot of physical pain. So basically a lot of events led me to Reiki, which I became Reiki attuned. And then I did a 30-day hypnotherapy training, which was 9 hours a day, sometimes longer. And I would say I was in an altered state of consciousness, whether I was actively in trance state or not, for at least 2 to 4 hours every single day for 30 days in this program. And that program really opened up my psychic senses. After that, I decided to open up my own practice. I had just gotten my bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley in psychology. I had my certification in hypnotherapy, and I was a Reiki practitioner now. So I started my own practice. I started doing Reiki and hypnotherapy with my clients. And as I was doing sessions with people, laying hands specifically with Reiki, I started to see images and feelings, and I started getting all these things. And then it started to unfold into an even more difficult thing for me to grapple with, which was I would feel a presence come in the room. And I would know it was a loved one, but I didn't know how to identify them or communicate with them. And with mediumship, when spirits come forward, one thing they may convey to you through their energy body, just by being close to their energy body as they come close to you, is the pain that they had when they died. And that's not because they're still in pain, but that's just the energetic imprint they have when their energy comes down to the physical realm to communicate with us. So I would suddenly feel like I was choking to death, or I was having a heart attack, or my head would hurt really bad. And I was like, what is happening? And it was very energetically draining. So I decided to look for a psychic development circle because I wanted to know more about this. I needed to learn what was happening. I needed to learn how to control it, and I needed to learn how to not just be. I felt like a victim to it. Basically, I had all of these things happening to me, and I was really disempowered, and I was confused, and just didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to about it. So I started going to a psychic development circle. I started reading about psychic development in books. I think I did some classes online. So I just really started to immerse myself in psychic development. And this class was weekly. I met with like a group of other people. And, with the hypnotherapy training and the psychic development circle, it was the first time I met other people who had paranormal experiences like I've had my whole life. And I really started to feel less alone. And in these spaces, it was really non-judgmental and open-minded kind of space where I could just say what I'm getting without having to really censor myself and basically shut myself up. Because all my life, I would get intuitions about people, or I would suddenly know things that I didn't feel like I could actually communicate. So I would hold them in, and that was just creating energy blockages, especially in my throat. There's so much that I was clearing in my throat from my ancestry, but also in this lifetime of having to shut my truth up, because I can't just say what I'm seeing and getting it. People don't understand, well, where are you getting this information? And then they think you're a threat. And that was my experience in the past. When I would say something that I shouldn't have known, people would not trust me, and they would leave me. I lost friends that way. So it was a really, really challenging situation to navigate. So basically, my path started with the intention to learn and understand what is happening to me. In this case, it was my psychic senses opening up, and to gain some footing and control over what's happening, and to become empowered versus the situation where I was really feeling disempowered. So the first step that I've written down for this opening the psychic senses has been intention. And this is also echoed in all of the research that I've done on spiritual practices worldwide, also in some other research situations where they were really interviewing spiritual leaders and people that do spiritual practices that are really healthy and optimistic and positive and feel like really, really alive. There was like 5 common things that they do. Well, the first thing is intention. And this is something that you see in psychic development too, is like you have to have a clear intention. That intention focuses your attention. So my intention was, I want to understand what's happening to me. I want to gain some control over it instead of having it just happen to me. And I want to understand what's happening and why it's happening. So I had a lot of these questions. So those were kind of like, my conscious and unconscious intentions. So if you're wanting to open up your psychic senses, your soul senses, and start to commune with your soul, then the first thing you need to do is just set the intention. Just consciously set the intention. So the definition of intention is a thing intended, an aim, or a plan. So you're basically just intending, and that's like basically you're crossing the threshold of, I'm entering this space where I'm going to open up to the intention of allowing whatever it is I need to know to come to me, or whatever it is I need to clear to come up for me to clear, so that I can open up my psychic senses and have clarity of and connection to my intuition. So what I say is like, carry this intention in your heart. Say I'm wanting to open up my psychic senses or my soul senses, and hold that in your heart, and really have it be something that you genuinely, authentically want to do. And You know, if you have fear or doubt, that's going to stop the momentum of the energy of the progress. But those are the two killers of intuition, fear and doubt. I'll talk more about that in a later video because that's a really, really big subject. So I wanted to introduce this process of how to set intention from a space where you're clear and you can really attract it to you quickly. Because you can just consciously throughout the day like set intentions, but when you drop into your soul space and you set an intention, it magnetizes to you like exponentially. That's my experience, and that's, you know, a lot of spiritual practices and leaders talk about that too. So what I call this is setting sacred space. So sacred space is, you know, setting an allotment of time where you're going to drop in and be in stillness and alone, not with other people. Dogs and cats are okay. I have dogs running around here. But dropping into sacred space and setting your intention from there. I'm going to talk about that probably in the next video because this is 20 minutes long. So I'm going to explain how to do the sacred space process next. And then the following videos, I'm going to talk about more details and getting more deeper and clarifying into that connection.